welcome to Talking Point with Stephen Taylor. Today in conversation, talking about mental health in more detail. Of course, I'm very closely linked to SADC and the work that they do. Today we're chatting to clinical psychologist Elise Beeby. How are you?
I'm very fine. And you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time out to come in and have a chat to us. So before we get to more about what you do, tell us a bit about yourself, like where you grew up, like what made you get into the profession of clinical psychologist. Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, I am from Johannesburg area. I was born in Oberholzer. I don't know if you know where that is.
Oh, where is that?
Yeah, my father, it's near Carltonville.
Okay.
Yes, my father was a businessman, a very astute businessman. He had his own garages and a couple of his own companies and also buildings. And my mom was a teacher who eventually became a lecturer at JCE, the Johannesburg College of Education. So I wanted to be a ballerina, but my father wasn't happy with that. So he said he's not going to support me. So very much against my own wishes, I went to the Rand Afrikaans University and had a ball of a time until my father arrived and said, if you don't pass, then you'll pay me back. Here's an agreement. Would you like to sign it? Wow. And then I started studying and I developed a great love for psychology and was selected for clinical psychology, which is a very difficult process. They only selected in those years 4 students. And I qualified at the Rand Afrikaans University and did my internship at Sterkfontein Hospital. And after that, I established quite a couple of practices and also went into the nursery school business, had a couple of my own nursery schools until I landed in Cape Town, where I'm now involved with the psychiatric facility, acute psychiatric facility, known as Palm Tree Clinic. We have 15 in-house patients, sure. And I'm the in-house clinical psychologist.
So what is the difference between a psychologist and a clinical psychologist? Is there a difference?
There's really a difference. Clinical, obviously, there's a selection process and it is driven by the diagnostic side. You have to work at a psychiatric hospital where you will do your internship under a psychiatrist. If you're a psychologist, it can be different fields of psychology. And also, if you work at a psychiatric hospital, they limit it also to clinical psychologists, yes.
So there's a difference between obviously a psychiatrist and a psychologist. You can't prescribe medication.
No, but we work very closely together. We assist also with the program for the different patients, and they prescribe obviously the medication. But we zoom into what are we going to offer the patient, what kind of modality, therapeutic modality would be the best under the circumstances.
So SADC is the mother body, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Yes. Obviously you work closely with them as well.
Very closely. We run a lot of the support groups there at Palm Tree Clinic, and we do quite a couple of workshops, and we open to the public and work in close proximity with them. We have a strong connection, yes.
So tell me, society don't know much about mental health. I mean, it's kind of like a taboo subject. It's not a subject that people speak around the table when they're eating dinner. They don't speak about mental health. There's a stigma around mental health. I mean, when somebody is diagnosed with, say, depression, people say, it's just depression, man. Get over it. You know, you can overcome it. Just have faith, get through it. Those are all myths. That's not true. There's various aspects to mental health, so I found out because I've done a lot of research on, there's depression, there's borderline personality, there's bipolar, there's many other,
the GAD,
yes,
and there's the schizophrenia, all the psychosis. Yes, there's a wide spectrum. Yes, to come back there, I think it's fear-driven, And it's also because people are not aware. There's no awareness, and that's why I'm so fond of SADC, because they do create an awareness and they try and normalize it so that it's out there and that you understand that all people go through depression, but it's the degree of depression that's important. I don't think there is a person that can say, I've lived on this planet without feeling ever down or depressed.
Yeah. When somebody passes away, or
that's all normal reactions, but I think if it continues, or the depth of the depression or the depth of the anxiety, if the feeling or fear becomes unmanageable, then we're really sitting with a problem.
So we have matrics that obviously bright their matrics, they do that exams every year. What should parents be looking for? Because I mean, we see a lot of teen suicides, people taking their lives and stuff like that. What should mothers and fathers be looking for when their matrics or students, their teens are doing exams and going through the school curriculum? What are some of the stuff that they should be, looking at? Yeah.
Looking at, yeah. The first thing is the youngster starts isolating himself or herself and battles to stand up in the morning. Also disturbances in eating hopelessly too much or not at all. And then also sleep disturbances like insomnia, can't go to bed at all at night. The excessive worrying and the terrible fear of failure and feeling that I'm not good enough and second best, and feeling very overwhelmed. And then also they tend to stonewall the parents, they tend to stop talking, and that's to me always a deadly sign, because in mental health, release is the most important thing. You have to release it, let go, otherwise it becomes like a cooking pot, and that feeling or fear can become unmanageable, and the person starts feeling very helpless and powerless and will turn feelings inwards, which can result in suicide. Often suicide is a cry of helplessness, and there's a lot of unresolved issues, including anger, that is suppressed there in the unconscious.
Do you think education plays a role? I mean, that person probably doesn't understand maybe what they're going through. They feel alone because, there's a stigma around mental health, and if I come out and say that I've got a depression or a problem with myself, people are going to think and judge me and all this stuff. What would you say to that?
You're spot on there. I think the big thing is the judgmental side. Yes. And that we're not a mindful society, where we understand, hear and listen, and where the youngster has a voice. So obviously then he or she will develop fear, and they will withdraw because of the fear of being judged or isolated. So they become very, very lonely, and they can't reach out because they feel abnormal, and they feel they're going to be targeted, and they feel they're weak. So it's very important to have an open conversation with your kids, and sometimes they have deep-seated secrets. I'm a person that believes that we have to deal with secrets, and I think these days people tend to avoid dealing with the underlying issues, and they sit with a lot of shame and guilt, and can therefore become very self-destructive and not feel good enough. And youngsters also lack in confidence. They have self-esteem issues or identity crises. I often find that, they might have a problem with their identity and they can't share it.
It's Talking Point with Stephen Taylor. We're in conversation talking more about mental health and how that affects people. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a moment. It's Talking Point with Stephen Taylor. Welcome back. We're in conversation with clinical psychologist Elise Beeby. Elise, welcome back. Thank you for still being here. We're in conversation about mental health. And the question that I have to ask you, Do you think that there's a lot of red tape around people wanting to go get the help that they need? I'm not talking about from a private, clinic or hospital side. I'm talking about from a government hospital side. I mean, if somebody wants to get help, there's so much red tape and stuff that they have to go through in order to get that help. What would you say about that?
Again, you're spot on. I think you must be reading up a lot.
No.
You're very knowledgeable.
I have people that are close to me that have mental health issues. So
Yes. No, it's long waiting lists, and it's very difficult then to get help. I think the help is there, but to actually get to a point where you can see the right person, that is the problem.
that is the problem.
And it's a long waiting list. I mean, if you look at a place like Valkenburg, I think their in-house program and what they offer, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's excellent. I have a lot of good reports from them. But actually to get in there and to, when you land up, on the waiting list and to eventually be able to be seen. So what we do at our clinic, for example, we would admit patients for up to 3 weeks, and if they're not stabilized or they need maybe to be certified, etc., then our psychiatrists, which would be Dr. Moodlier and Dr. Albert or Dr. David Chait, etc., would then assist in getting them transferred.
But obviously there's a cost implication to that. For somebody that
The
doesn't like...
medical aids pay, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a 3-week in-house program, but thereafter, to also get them there, you need to work with the psychiatrists at the hospital, government hospital.
Sometimes people don't need to be admitted. They just need that outpatient. They just need that, like maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks to speak to somebody. Counseling. I think counseling is important, and just to have somebody on your side. What would you say to people, the people that don't have medical aid, the people that can't afford to go out and get the help? What help can they get?
And obviously, again, we're looking at the state.
Yes.
And they've got their counselling facilities. Otherwise, one can go and seek the help of a lay counsellor. There's a lot of people that qualify just as a counsellor, but then again, they could negotiate with them in terms of rates. If you're a clinical psychologist or a counselling psychologist or an educational psychologist, etc., and you're registered with the health board, then obviously the medical aids pay. But again, if you look at Valkenburg and all these places, they do have the interns. And at every state hospital, they have the interns that have to qualify. So they will be seeing them there as well. And also at the universities, they run their clinics.
Support groups are also important. I mean, are there support groups in Cape Town and around South Africa where people can speak to and be around, like people that are going through the same stuff that they are going through? Is there anything like that?
Yes, all around the whole of South Africa, and that's why I've told you that SADC, they run all these support groups. They also help people of the public that's got an interest in depression and anxiety or has suffered themselves at a stage. They set them up also and assist them to start running their own support groups. A support group is extremely important because you need to feel safe.
Yes.
And there you can go to one place on this planet where you don't get judged and where you can speak and be heard and understood and realize that other people go through exactly the same. And you can also get information in terms of what worked for who. I always say, it's very easy to give advice to somebody who's, for example, lost a child and goes through deep depression. But unless you've lost that child yourself, you don't know what you're talking about, really. You can have empathy, but it's only when you've gone through those raw, bare emotions of loss that you understand what the other person is going through.
How badly does substance abuse play a role in mental health?
It's huge. I think that is basically one of the major problems that we're sitting with now. And often with a substance abuser, you find that there's an underlying problem with depression or anxiety or a guilt or shame or some unresolved issue or a low self-esteem, and they want to form part of the group. So it's self-medication initially. They self-medicate, and before they know, they're addicted because it becomes unmanageable. And if you really, again, and I think there's a lot of been said and done and written about how the brain works, and then you have the addiction setting in.
What is a chemical imbalance?
It's where the chemistry of the brain is imbalanced, so the brain is going to secrete far more cortisol instead of endorphins, so you develop a serotonin and dopamine imbalance.
And so can somebody, that would affect somebody going forward in life? What are some of the things the challenges that they might face having a chemical imbalance? Would it necessarily lead to a mental health problem, or?
I think, that it depends on how severe the imbalance is again, but of course it will, because it's going to affect your mood. You're going to be negative, you're going to lack energy, you're going to find it difficult to remain motivated. There's a big problem with concentration and fluctuation of moods. You will battle to control your immediate gratification and impulse control, all that kind of thing. So of course, depending on how severe your anxiety and depression would be, it will have an effect. And that again depends on the chemical imbalance in the brain. Yes.
You mentioned something to me off air, which is really interesting. You said that you see mental health coming more to the public. We see more issues of mental health happening in South Africa. Why do you think that is?
I think we sit in a society where people don't feel safe. So they go into fight or flight mode in an attempt to survive, and in survival mode. So when they don't feel safe, they'll fight, or they'll avoid, or they'll play all kinds of monkey games in an attempt to survive. So we don't have trust left, and we start fearing. And that's why people are fearful to grow up. They're scared of adulthood. They're scared they're not going to get a job. They're scared of having to grow up in society the way it is currently.
So what should people be looking for? I mean, mental health I wouldn't say it's an issue, but I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it is out there. And it's something that we need to take note of, and that we need to do more about. We need to speak more about it. Now, there are different elements to mental health. Tell us about some of those and what people should be looking out for, and when they should be acting and saying, right, we need to take this person to get help now. Tell us about some of those things.
I think what you, as a parent, so let's look at the entire society and also the parent. Whenever you see a change in personality, you know a person is a certain way inclined, and all of a sudden there's a change. You will also be looking at, is there a change in the person's mood? Is the person sometimes very down and other times very happy and elated, and there doesn't seem to be balance? So that is the main factor that you will be looking at. And then you'll also look at the lifestyle and how it deteriorates and changes, and the value systems, how that is changing, and who is the person or the youngster mixing with, the peer groups, and whether he or she is becoming obsessed and preoccupied with certain aspects of society.
And tell me the difference.
Party scene, can't actually stop partying morning, noon and night. Now we know it's a phase, but if that continues, that's for example.
So we know depression, we know about that. There's bipolar and there's borderline personality disorder. Tell me about those two in more detail.
Okay, now let's start, obviously if we start with the bipolar, that's a mood disorder. So we're specifically going to have a look at the moods of the patient. So the patient is going to become so manic at times that he or she can be totally irrational and make a lot of irrational decisions, can, for example, decide when he or she is manic to just sell their home or to walk out of their job, or might even become psychotic depending on how serious the mood disorder is, where they lose contact with reality, and they might even develop grandiose, where they feel that they're a god or they're Christ or whatever. And then also with the lowest of moods, severe depression, very negative, suicidal, can't get out of bed, have no energy left, very lethargic, very self-destructive. And then that is the bipolar. So the bipolar, we focus on the mood. And when we look at the borderline, then it's a personality disorder. So usually that stems from childhood. Yes. And the way the child has been brought up, and lack of border with boundaries during early childhood, and also trauma. And the person then develops a personality disorder where they battle with boundaries, they battle with impulse control, they can also be very suicidal, they also have a mood disorder, and they can also do or get involved in a lot of risky behavior. For example, just like the bipolar, sexual, etc. Yes.
And obviously drugs could play, and alcohol could play a role in that.
A major problem there. And then also, you know, some of them can have attentional deficit barrier problems, ADHD or ADD, etc. So it depends, you know, that's why not everybody can treat psychiatric patients, because the diagnosis is very important, and usually that is done by a psychiatrist with the assistance of a clinical psychologist. And we do obviously a lot of assessments as well, psychometric evaluations.
So when is it important, obviously it's important for somebody to get counseling, but when is it important for somebody to get medication? And is it important for somebody that has a mental health issue to be medicated, or can it sometimes be dealt with via counseling?
Again, it depends on the degree. I think reach out, go and see your GP, and let the GP advise you. They're very well trained to know whether you should see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. If the problem continues, I would say it's very important to then go and see a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist or a psychologist, a counseling psychologist, etc., that will assist you and help you to get onto medication. If they feel that that's necessary, they will refer you back to the GP or to a psychiatrist, etc.
Now, somebody might be watching this and thinking to themselves, okay, maybe I have a problem, maybe I, have possibly one of these mental health issues. What advice would you give to them, and getting the right help? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, reach out, talk. It's the most important thing to do, is to reach out, to speak, to read up. And if you feel you've got depression, go and read up about depression, and then reach out, go to your GP or contact SISA or contact a clinical psychologist or a psychologist in the area, and reach out. It is so important. Why have a secret? If it's there, we can resolve it. Even if you then don't have a problem and you're just going through a life change or a life challenging event, why not speak? We made to be heard, yes, and to listen and to be guided and to share. So the worst thing on this planet is to keep everything a secret and think it will go away.
It's always alarming to me because, mental health it's kind of like an illness. Yes. So if you have diabetes, you go and get that sorted out. If you have cancer, you have that sorted out. And like any illness, you go and get medication, or you go and get counseling, or you get you get it sorted out. With mental health, it's kind of different, but it shouldn't be different. You should have, be able to sort it out.
because it's an illness.
Yes.
You know, you can just as well have diabetes and then you go through a certain program. That is exactly the same if you have a mental problem. And if we really look at it, how many people go through life without along the line going through some difficulty? We all need to go to a harbour where we can feel safe and where we can speak and we can sort out our concerns and our worries. And mental health to me is balance, you know, it's self-discipline.
I think it's ignorance from people because they don't really understand or they don't, know more about it. So therefore they plead ignorance and, that's why they say mean things because they don't really know what they're saying and what they're doing and how their small little word could possibly be the end of somebody's life. Because they might be at the end and thinking, I can't take this anymore, and that person says something silly, and that's the end.
Yeah, and that person goes into trance, into focus state of attention and acts out whatever that person has said. You're silly, or pull yourself right, and then they feel so helpless and powerless. You're 100% right, yes. So
but people are not alone.
They're all alone, and people don't know what they can say, and we can also not blame them because maybe they're not aware and they feel they're not prepared to tap dance around a person who is down. It's silly in their book. So we're all prisoners of perception. We're all indoctrinated human beings, the product of the past. So if you come from a mindset, a background where mental illness is taboo, it's very difficult for you to break loose and say, after all, I also sometimes feel depressed. With a depressed person, if you can normalize it, it's okay. We all go through phases. We're one in woundedness. The only difference is the depth or the degree of the pain or woundedness.
So the name of your clinical...
It's Palm Tree Clinic.
Okay.
It's a 15-bed psychiatric facility. It's situated in Pence Drive in Flamingo Vlei, near Blouberg Strand. And it's holistic. We have occupational therapists, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, the physiotherapists, all working together as a team.
And do you have a website, or how can people get hold of you?
Have.
Okay, to give us the...
www.palmtreeclinic.co.za.
palmtreeclinic.co.za.
Yes.
Great.
It's also reception at Palm Tree Clinic, and I'm Elise Beeby at telcomsa.net.
Elise, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. It is a conversation that people need to have more of, and people need to know that they are not alone, that there are other people going through what they're going through, and that ultimately there is help, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
And people need to be open, honest, and transparent. It's okay.
It's been Talking Point with Stephen Taylor. Interesting conversation here about mental health. And of course, make sure that you are visiting that website, www.palmtreeclinic.co.za. Get involved with my show at Stephen Taylor SA on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, go and visit the show's Facebook page, Talking Point on Facebook. Just go and search it and you'll find it there. Catch you back next week, same time, same place. Have a good one. Bye-bye.